Hello and welcome. My name is Angie Holden and I'm the blogger behind The Country Chic Cottage. Today we're going to talk about customizing stuffed animals, and I'm going to use these little stuffed bunnies as my example project, but you can use this video any time of the year to customize whatever stuffed animals you would like. Now I'm going to add a name to mine. However, you could add names, dates, seriously so many options for customizing stuffed animals. Now I'm going to do this 3 ways, so no matter what type of crafter you are, what type of crafting machines you have at home, you can do this. So we are going to use HTV for one, I'm going to use Infusible Ink for one, and then I'm going to use Sublimation for the third bunny. And then at the end I'll sort of compare and show you which one I like best. However, all 3 methods do work. So no matter if you just have a Cricut machine, you just have a sublimation printer, you can make this project. So before we get started, let's take a look at the supplies we're going to use. For this project, you'll need your stuffed animal. Now I'm going to use a little Easter bunny peep here. I got these off Amazon, I'll link to those below. However, basically any stuffed animal would work here. And you can either customize the body, the ear, or both. So basically anywhere that you want to add some customization to a stuffed animal, this technique would work. You'll need your heat source, and then you'll need something to add the customization. So I'm going to do 3 different options in this video. I'm going to do Infusible Ink, I am going to use some HTV, and I'm going to do sublimation with the sublimation printer. Now the sublimation and the Infusible Ink both need some polyester content in order to bond with the fabric. Most stuffed animals, the outside is going to be made with some polyester. At least 65% polyester is ideal for this. Now the animals that I'm using are a variety of different colors. I bought a variety pack off Amazon. Anytime you're putting sublimation or Infusible Ink on something that has a color, black is going to work best because Infusible Ink and sublimation is going to be translucent, meaning the base color can show through. Black is going to give you the most vibrant result on these colorful stuffed animals. So that's why I'm using all black today. So now we're going to design our names. So you can use name, dates, whatever type of personalization you would like. And I'm going to show you how to make this design both in Cricut Design Space as well as Canva. So let's head to the computer and take a look at that. First, if you're going to use HTV or Infusible Ink, you would open up Cricut Design Space. Then click text and type your name. You can then pull down the font box and pick a font. Now you can choose from Cricut fonts or even system fonts that are on your computer. I'm using the font Retro Friday, and I will link to it in the description below this video. Once you have your name, you'll want to measure the surface that you want to add it to. So measure the bunny, either the body of the bunny or even the ear if you want to add a design to the ear. Then resize the name within Cricut Design Space. And once you're done with that, you can click Make. I'm going to cut this on a mat and click Confirm. Then if you're using HTV or Infusible Ink, either one, you will need to mirror your cut. Then you can click Continue and go ahead and proceed to pick your material type. For most HTV products, I use the Everyday Iron-On setting, and for Infusible Ink, I use the Infusible Ink setting. Then you can head to your Cricut machine to cut your design. For the HTV, we'll add that shiny side down to the mat, and remember we did mirror the cut within Cricut Design Space. And then I'm going to use my Cricut Joy Extra to cut the design. Once that's done cutting, we'll just unload. For the Infusible Ink, I actually have a scrap piece, and we're going to put that with the carrier sheet side down on the mat. Press it down well. Then we'll go ahead and load this. And press go to cut the design. Once that's done cutting, we'll just unload. For the HTV, we're just going to weed it, and we want to weed everything from the outside as well as things like the centers of the letters. And there are my 3 names completely weeded, and now this one's ready to press. With Infusible Ink, it's important to sort of bend and crack the Infusible Ink before trying to weed it. Then you're just going to carefully lift away this outside. And again, you're going to remove things like the centers of letters. Now in this case, you really wouldn't want to use weeding tools because you risk the chance that you'll scratch the Infusible Ink. So I just like to use my hands. Then once again, here's my completely weeded design, and it is ready for application. So when pressing things like this, you really don't exactly know what it's made out of. So I like to use extra caution no matter which method I'm using for pressing. So we're going to press the HTV to this stuffed animal. And for the HTV, I'm going to add it in this area here. And we're just going to put the HTV into location. And because this is a weird surface, it's probably going to be rounded. Just use a couple of pieces of heat-resistant tape to hold that HTV into place. Now, I have my heat press heated up, and I have it heated up to 305 degrees for 10 seconds. That time and temperature is going to depend on the HTV that you're using, so be sure to check that out. And then, like I said, this is an unknown surface probably, so I'm just going to use a Teflon sheet and cover this up. Now, this could be parchment paper, butcher paper, whatever, and I'm using this little press from Makerflow. However, like a little handheld press like the Easy Press Mini is fine for projects like this. So I'm just going to place this over this end of my project, and I like to keep this in place just so that the heat press is not directly touching this stuffed animal. Like I said, this is probably going to be an unknown material. You don't know what's in it. You don't want to melt the stuffed animal. So 305, 10 seconds is probably going to be a good start. We may have to do more. We might even be able to back off. It just depends on the HTV you're using and the stuffed animal. So we're just going to go ahead and do that for 10 seconds. Then pick that up. Next thing, because this is a weird surface, something like a scraper. And as this cools, just use the scraper over that HTV. This is going to push it down in any cracks and crevices that may be on your stuffed animal. And it's going to help the HTV to adhere. Now, I would also wait until it's fairly cool. And because it's a stuffed animal, it might hold heat longer than, say, a shirt or something like that. So we're just going to allow it to cool as we run the scraper over the surface. And then once it's close to being cool here, I'm going to lift up the heat-resistant tape and just kind of try to peel back the corner. And it looks like the HTV is stuck. If it wasn't stuck at this point, I could reapply the heat and start all over again. So you can apply the heat as many times as you would like, but applying less and seeing if it sticks is probably a better idea. So applying less heat, see if it sticks. You can always apply more. And that stuck really, really well. Now, to finish this off, if you think it didn't stick well, or if like you just want some extra assurance that this isn't going anywhere, like this is for a child, so cover it with your Teflon sheet again, and this time press for about half the time. So that was about 5 seconds. Then I'll lift that up, peel back that Teflon sheet, and now that HTV is really, really in there, and it is like embedded into the fur of the stuffed animal. Like, I don't think it's going anywhere. So that's how you would add HTV to a stuffed animal. For the Infusible ink, we want to make sure there's not any debris on there. Then we can add the Infusible ink into place, locate it, and we're going to want to use some heat-resistant tape just to make sure this doesn't move as we're pressing. So I'm going to add 2 pieces of heat tape, and then we want to cover this up to protect our press. So I'm going to cover this up. This is a piece of Sublimation protective paper. Butcher paper would also work here. And I'm going to tape that into place as well. And then we can press. Now we're going to do 385 degrees for 40 seconds. I'm using this super small little heat press from Makerflow. Now I do want to make sure that the heat press itself stays on the paper and isn't going onto the surface of the stuffed animal. And just a very light pressure is fine. And we just want to make sure that it gets nice and hot. Now, 385 degrees, 40 seconds is a great place to start. However, if you struggle at all, I would increase the amount of time, not the temperature, since we really don't know what these little stuffed animals are made out of. You want to be as careful as possible about adding too much heat to the animal itself. So 385, 40 seconds. And then you can peel back this protective paper first. And it looks like it transferred. So I'm going to just peek at the corner, and it looks great. So I'm gonna go ahead and just peel this back. It is very hot. Your letters might fall off, it's fine at this point. And there you have your name on a stuffed animal. Now, the sort of fuzz on the stuffed animal might be pressed down from your heat press, and I just kind of fluff it back up. And if you go all in one direction with your name, it'll read better. If, say, you were to push it all up, it won't read as well. And that's one reason why a nice chunky font is great for the Infusible Ink portion of this. The weeding is easier, and you can read the name a little bit better. But overall, this did great on this stuffed animal. To make the design for Sublimation, I'm going to use Canva. I'm going to do a custom size, and I'm going to make it the size of the Sublimation paper I'm using, which is 8.5 by 11. Then I'm going to add text, add a text box, type my text. For this one, I'm going to use the bright retro font, and again, you can resize it to fit onto your surface. And we can see that it's going to take up very little of my Sublimation paper. So you could fill this up with names or any other designs that you needed to print on your Sublimation printer. Once you're ready to print, you'll click Share, Download, and you want to download it as a PDF for print, CMYK, to use with your Sublimation printer. Go ahead and download, then pull it up and print it to your Sublimation printer. Now, I do recommend a black sublimation because we're sublimating on colors here. However, if you were sublimating on something else, you can definitely change the color of the font. So after I downloaded that for Sublimation, I went ahead and printed this on my Sublimation paper. So this is Sublimation ink printed on a Sublimation printer on Sublimation paper. And I did mirror the entire print in my printer settings. You can see that the names are mirrored, and that is an important step. For Sublimation, all you have to do is use some scissors and cut the names apart to get them ready to apply. So when adding Sublimation to a stuffed animal, you just want to lint roll it off really quickly. Sort of brush the fuzz on the stuffed animal in one direction or the other. Add your Sublimation print right into place. And we're going to use a couple pieces of heat resistant tape to hold it down. So we're going to locate it. A couple of pieces of heat resistant tape. Then you want to protect your heat press as well as your animal, so some kind of protective paper here. This is Sublimation protective paper. You could also use butcher paper, and then just use a couple pieces of heat resistant tape to hold that into place. Now this is ready to press. So I'm going to use this little MakerFlow heat press here, just some kind of small heat press, and I'm going to do 385 for 45 seconds. Now you'll notice that my press is on the paper, so it's not directly touching the stuffed animal in any location, and just a light pressure works fine. Now if this time and temperature does not work, so we're going to kind of peak test at the end here. If the time and temperature does not work, I would probably increase the time and not the temperature. It's just because you're not going to know what the stuffed animal is made out of, and you definitely don't want to melt the stuffed animal at all. So increasing the time might be a better option. So we're just going to do this for about 45 seconds for Sublimation. Once that's done, just pick that up. We'll remove that protective paper here, and then you can just kind of peek and make sure it's sublimated, and this did. So I can just remove that Sublimation print and the tape, and it looks great. Now, the sort of fuzz of the stuffed animal might be laying down because you applied that heat. I just sort of fluff it up. Just if you play with it quite a bit, it will start to look better. Now, I picked a chunky font for these on purpose for Sublimation because if you sort of put the fuzz in one way or the other, it might get a little blurry or hazy because those pieces of fuzz are sort of lifting around. The chunkier the font, the better it will look no matter which way you sort of lay it down. So now, like, I can't even tell where the press was at this point, really. So it looks really, really great. And that's a way to do Sublimation on stuffed animals. Here's an up close look at the three versions. So HTV, Infusible Ink, Sublimation. I personally like the Sublimation a lot better. I just think it looks cleaner and neater. However, Infusible Ink would be my second choice. HTV is definitely my third choice. I mean, it works, but because the surface is textured, obviously it's a plushy stuffed animal, the HTV sort of turns out textured as well, and it just doesn't look great. So I would say Infusible Ink if you don't have a sublimation printer, and if you have a sublimation printer, definitely use it for a project like this one. So now, like I said, sublimation was my favorite, Infusible Ink was my second favorite. I would definitely use one of those if you can. If you are in a pinch, I gave you the instructions to use for the HTV for this, so you can definitely add HTV to a stuffed animal. Now I did these small little bunnies. This can be used for any type of stuffed animal. The process is the same. Now, if you are getting into a small area of a stuffed animal, let's say that like you need to do the belly and it has like big legs coming out of the side, something like this little press that I used might not work very well. So you might need to use like a little Easy Press Mini. Just be sure that if you're going to use the Easy Press Mini and you're going to use it for sublimation, use it on the 3rd setting and make sure that you do 45 seconds in each area of your custom design and that custom design gets completely covered with the heat. That's the only tip I have if you need to use a smaller press to get into some tight areas with some of the animals that you might encounter. But otherwise, you can use this video to add customization to your stuffed animals. Now, if you want the things that I used, perhaps you're in love with these bunnies, I will link to all the supplies I used in the description below this video, so you can head there and grab those supplies. And I'll also link to that font I used in Design Space. Pretty sure I can find it. I'll try to link to the font as well. And then the other one I used in Canva is in Canva. I don't know if I can find it anywhere else, but I will take a look around and see if I can. Now, if you need anything, if you have any questions about this process, drop down in the comment section and ask away. If you liked this video and it helped you, give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, head on over to my YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button. I have videos just like this one every single week, and trust me, you don't want to miss any of those. So thank you all so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.